Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand what this Romeo-Juliet clause actually means. Well, we are covering Romeo-Juliet clause today because of POCSO Act. POCSO Act, if you can remember, it criminalizes sexual relations with a child who is less than 18 years of age. So many people, including the Supreme Court, are of the opinion that you need to give certain kind of an exemption, and this exemption is what is called as a Romeo-Juliet clause. So we'll cover it in great detail in our today's video, and the notes which I will be using in our today's session. In case if you want to download them, you can go to this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live, and while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. Now, what is happening is that the Supreme Court has urged the Union Law Secretary to consider initiating steps in order to curb the misuse of Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012, which is popularly abbreviated as POCSO Act. Now, the bench, which comprised of two judges in a particular matter they were hearing related to the age of consent, they said that the Union government should consider introduction of what is called as a Romeo-Juliet clause in order to exempt the genuine adolescent relationships from being described as an instance of child sexual abuse. So this is what is the context of our today's discussion. So first, let us try to understand what this POCSO Act is all about, that we are going to cover, and then what Romeo-Juliet clause or the exemption under Romeo-Juliet clause actually means. First, let us try to understand what is the POCSO Act 2012. Now, the POCSO Act, it defines a child who is anyone below the age of year 18. Now, consent of a child in POCSO Act is basically irrelevant. So that is why any voluntary sexual activity also would be determined as a serious criminal offense under the POCSO Act of 2012. Now, what you need to understand, according to POCSO Act, if there is a sexual relations between a 40-year-old person and a 16-year-old children, that is also a criminal offense. Similarly, even if this sexual relations is belonging to two children, a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old, that is also qualified as a criminal offense. So that is why POCSO Act criminalizes any sexual activity blanket wise. So it does not consider whether one of the person involved is an adult or both of these person involved in a relationship is children, right? So that is what POCSO Act talks about. Now, what you need to understand, there are certain problems we have seen in implementation of the POCSO Act. The court itself has noted that families have started to weaponize the POCSO Act in order to block consensual relationships between two children. And because of that, we have seen many criminal cases are filed against teenage boys, so much so that they've abducted the child, kidnapped the child, and this leads to long pre-trial incarceration, which eventually you can understand damages any child. So there was a need in order to exempt consensual sexual relations between two children, and this is where the Romeo-Juliet clause actually comes in. Now, what you need to understand, Romeo-Juliet clause is not basically a free pass for anyone to have a sexual relation with a child. Rather, this only exists in form of close in age exemption, which is provided in many countries, including the United States. So what this Romeo-Juliet clause actually does is that it protects consensual relationships between two children. Right? So adolescents who are close in their gaps would stand to benefit because of this exemption, that is the Romeo-Juliet clause, and there is a very specific condition that needs to be fulfilled. First, this relationship between two children should be without coercion, should be without any form of exploitation, and should not lead to power imbalance between these two persons. So only in this case, the Romeo-Juliet exemption would be provided. Now, the Romeo-Juliet itself, you can understand, was taken from the Shakespearean tragedy Romeo-Juliet, where two children were involved in a relationship and both of them were killed because their families were warring with each other, right? So this is where the idea of Romeo-Juliet actually comes in. Now, let me be very specific about Romeo-Juliet clause. So suppose there is a consensual relationship between a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old children, which consensual relationship, then it would not be prosecuted for a statutory rape as it has been done so, because the POCSO Act does not provide for any kind of exemption. And without such a clause, the POCSO treats both of these cases identically. So first case is when an adult is abusing a child. So rightfully this should be punished as a criminal offense. But POCSO Act, on the other hand, also punishes when two teenagers are involved in a romantic relationship. So this is the kind of exemption that the Romeo and Juliet clause seeks to exempt. Now, the bluntness with the POCSO Act is what as was at the heart of the problem, and this is what the Romeo-Juliet clause wants to create an exception for. Now, what is the rationale behind this exception? You need to understand. Now, a PIL was filed on sexual offences in the Supreme Court, where Supreme Court senior advocate Indira Jaisingh is acting as a friend of a court called as amicus curiae, right? Now, in this judgment or in this case, the senior advocate, Mrs. Indira Jaisingh, she has argued that this blanket criminalizing on one hand a relationship between an adult and a child, and on the same pedestal, POCSO also criminalizes a sexual relationship between two consenting individuals that are children, right? So this blanket criminalization, first of all, it violates Article 14 of the Constitution, because Article 14, if you can remember, provides for equality before law, and it also provides for equal protection of the law. So you need equal protection, particularly for two consenting children who are involved in a sexual relationship. Similarly, there are also Article 21, which provides you the right to freedom or the right to get yourself involved romantically with another person. So all of these fundamental rights which are provided with the supreme law of the land, that is the Constitution, would be violated if these exemptions are not provided. Similarly, Indira Jaisingh is also of the opinion that adolescents these days, they have what is called as evolving capacity. You need to understand, children these days are exposed to many such information, information or education that they were not having the luxury of, say, 30-40 years back, right? So now the teenagers, they are of very evolving capacity. First of all, we are ignoring the biology, that is children these days are hitting puberty early. Similarly, their decision making ability is somewhat better as compared to a children 40 years ago. Because of internet, because of many things, children are exposed to much more information at an earlier age. So we need to take into account the evolving capacity of a child, particularly between 16 to 18 years of age, and therefore what Indira Jaisingh feels that this kind of an exemption should be provided so that two consulting children, whenever they are in a relationship, would not stand to be prosecuted under POCSO Act, which they are so currently. Now, there is also a data backing this kind of a thinking. If you can remember, in the past 2016 to 2020, that is 5 years time period, 25% of POCSO cases, that is 1/4 of POCSO cases in 3 states, Maharashtra, Assam and West Bengal, it involved two consenting children who were involved in romantic consensual relationship, but they were prosecuted because of the POCSO Act, as there was no exception. And you'd notice there are some kind of patterns also involved. First of all, parents, they filed rape and kidnapping cases after development. In other hand, you'll also see these kind of cases are often linked to intercaste or interreligious relationships. And victims, even though they later testify in favor of the accused, but you'll see this creates a high societal damage. Although it leads to low conviction, but the damage done to a child who has been incarcerated for a long because of wrongful exemption or because of wrongful accusation by the accused party would lead to several consequences on that child. So this is what the data is saying, and that is why the court is also now of the opinion that you need to provide certain kind of an exemption to the consensual relationships. Now the government is, on the other hand, is very conservative about it. The government is trying to resist this change, and government also has a very solid argument. You need to understand that as well. Now, Union government is of the opinion that the 18 years cutoff, what we have set in the POCSO Act, is a very deliberate cutoff. It is not some arbitrary cutoff. If you remember other laws of India, that is the right to vote, it also qualifies an individual when they get over and above 18 years of age. Similarly, you can drive or ride a car only if you are 18 years age, right? So this is a kind of consistency the laws have been applied, which determines a child as anyone who is 18 years of age, and as soon as you become 18, you are considered as an adult. So first, government is of the opinion that 18 years cutoff is not an arbitrary cutoff, it is somewhat a deliberate cutoff. Also, government thinks that if you give consent exception, it would put risk on a child of loopholes, and these loopholes can be used by defense in order to prevent any adult even from getting prosecuted under the POCSO Act. Similarly, children, even though they are maturing these days, but they still remain vulnerable to manipulation by adults. And if you provide any dilution, any exception, this could create an opportunity where these dilutions would be misused or it would mask abuse related to child trafficking. So Union government is of the opinion, even borrowing from the Law Commission's recommendation of 2023, Union government wants the judiciary to decide on the matter of exemption on a case-to-case basis. And Union government does not want to amend POCSO and to provide an exemption because otherwise it would be misused by many people, right? So this is what the Union government stand is. And we have understood what a Romeo-Juliet clause is. First of all, you need to understand POCSO. It basically criminalizes any sexual activity between two children, right? But the Romeo-Juliet clause wants to exempt this particularly to children belonging to a very narrow age gap of 16 to 18 years based on the fact of evolving capacity of their decision making, right? So this is the summary of our today's discussion. There's a very important question that I've curated exactly on the lines of UPSC pattern. But before that, we have started taking admissions to our resolution batches, which would start from 27th of January. If you want to take admissions in these batches, this is a morning batch essentially. You can go to our website and apply the code ATS Live. You'll get maximum discounts. There are two separate batches, one for 2027 and another one for 2028. So decide accordingly and make sure if you have to thrive, learn to use the code ATS Live. Now, this is the question that I want you guys to solve. This is a question exactly modeled on the question in 2019. In 2019, UPSC asked which article of the Constitution provides you the right to marry. So similarly, which of the article of the Constitution in India safeguards an individual's right to choose and engage in a romantic relationship? Do let me know the correct answer in the comment section. The ones who get it right would get a thumbs up from my side. And once again, if you want to download the notes, they will be available on this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live, the QR code of which is in front of you. So this is all from my side. Please have a very good night and we'll see each other again tomorrow.